What's going on, guys? This is AndrewChicken and welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk about the single most neglected champion in Paladins who lacks everything from skins to build diversity to a large player base. Torvald. Torvald has had an interesting time in Paladins for the past 3 years. He received a near total rework early on in the open beta, and went from a must ban in rank to somebody that nobody ever plays. He also hasn't received a skin since November of 2017, and has been almost constantly nerfed for the past 2 years. In 2017, Torvald was a close-quarters juggernaut who could silence multiple people at once for 1.5 seconds, destroy shields quickly while replenishing his own with recharge, and destroy anyone who came near him with his gauntlet that had a solid 500 damage per second, which is sensible considering that he had a 6,000 health personal shield and 3,500 health at first, and later he had 5,000 health with a 2,000 health personal shield. He was like a beta version of Rom, if Rom actually had a pseudo-melee weapon. Torvald was amazing back then. He could actually tank a lot of damage and battle other frontlines really successfully. However, they eventually reworked him to play as more of a passive protector who could save his teammates from death. This was strong too, as he could now attack from a much longer range with higher DPS, albeit at the cost of a huge chunk of his HP being removed. The shields he could give teammates were strong too, having up to 2,000 HP instead of the measly 1,000 HP he could get today with the help of Thanks Grandpa. He became more of a buffer and less of a juggernaut, but he was still strong and even a must-ban in ranked at one point due to the damage buff he could give with Field Study. Over time though, all this got nerfed to the point where Torvald is now. Today I'll be going over Torvald's kit in its current state and analyzing everything that is wrong with him, and then I'll offer a few suggestions for how this champion could be fixed, so that he's fun and strong again, but not too insanely overpowered. Let's start off with Torvald's primary fire, his gauntlet. This is nearly identical to Khan's weapon in terms of DPS, dealing 180 damage every quarter of a second for a total of 720 damage per second. Khan's actually fires a little bit slower at 0.26 seconds, but deals the same amount of damage per shot, so his is slightly less than that. However, there are a few setbacks with Torvald's weapon that ultimately makes it worse than Khan's. For starters, it's a projectile weapon, which is already a huge setback for trying to track high mobility or flying targets, since it's much harder to lead projectiles on those champions instead of shooting directly with a hit skin weapon like Khan's. Khan can also hit headshots on enemy champions, which increases the damage done by his weapon shot by 50%. If Khan only hits headshots, he'll do significantly more damage than Torvald, and in a direct duel, if Khan hits just 25% of his shots as headshots, he'll be able to kill Torvald much quicker than Torvald could ever kill Khan. However, Torvald's DPS isn't the biggest problem he has, and is still higher than other champions like Makoa or Terminus. Torvald's next issue is his protection. This ability used to be really strong, and it's pretty much forced the enemy team to buy Wrecker in the past. However, in its current state, it's next to useless. Torvald's protection has just a measly 500 health, which can be one-shot by almost every champion and takes just a few extra shots from those with repeating, high fire rate weapons like Victor's or Vivian's. He can buff the health to 1000 with Thanks Grandpa, but even this can be one-shot by snipers and shot in without any Wrecker, and it only takes Wrecker 1 or 2 to be destroyed by everyone else. While in some situations this can end up saving someone, it's not nearly as big of a factor to consider in a duel as it used to be in the past. And while we're on the topic of his protection, let's discuss talents. Thanks Grandpa is the only viable talent for Torvald in today's meta because it buffs his protection to something only slightly more useful at helping other champions survive. Field Study only gives a 10% damage buff compared to Genesis' 15% with Luminary, and that buff is only applied if the 500 health shield he gives to people doesn't get destroyed immediately from a Stray and Droxus shot or something like that. Direct Current is also completely useless. While the extra range can be helpful in a select few circumstances, it doesn't give any damage buff to the beam, and it doesn't solve the problem that Nullify already has, which is that it can be countered by walls. Torvald must always maintain a direct line of sight with the enemy he's nullifying, and he also has to remain within a close distance to that target. With the old runic blast he had in beta, he shot out a blast that exploded after traveling a short distance and could affect multiple people for exactly 1.5 seconds, and its duration could only be shortened by resilience. This was a much more reliable way to go about silencing people than what Torvald has today, because while silence is a powerful ability to have, you need to have a reliable and consistent way to apply it. His recharge is decent, considering he only has a 2000 health personal shield to begin with. It charges it up quickly and it isn't really too much of a hassle. However, his personal shield itself also sucks. Ruckus' emitter has the exact same amount of health, but Ruckus has amazing mobility as well as higher damage potential than Torvald. Considering that Torvald has the lowest HP pool in the frontline class and no mobility whatsoever, his shield should be made larger or his health should be buffed to compensate, especially considering that personal shields aren't affected by Haven or Blast shields, and they get destroyed much faster with Wrecker, so by the time late game rolls around, Torvald pretty much never has his shield. And lastly, Torvald's ultimate. There isn't really too much of a problem with the actual crowd control effect this ultimate has. It's amazing for clearing points and sending enemies flying to their doom. The problem lies with the fact that Torvald is not crowd control immune during this ultimate, meaning that Makoa can hook him out of it, Atlas can rewind him out of it, Bomb King can stun him out of it, and the list goes on and on. Most tanks have crowd control immunity in their ultimate or some form of other protection like a dome shield or immortality, but Torvald has none of that. This is the same problem that Atlas had, but they're giving crowd control immunity to him during his ultimate in the latest patch Radiant Stars, so I don't see why Torvald shouldn't receive the same treatment. This would at least make it so the ultimate cannot be cancelled by the tiniest, most unfortunate stun. Now, let's talk about Torvald's cards, because he's got some more major flaws here. For starters, Torvald has extremely lackluster self-sustain compared to other tanks. Barret can have several hundred healing per second from his turrets, Ashe can have 50% lifesteal and hundreds of healing per second with Brawl, Inara has amazing damage reduction and increased healing while in Earthen Guard, and Rom heals himself for every few shots he lands with his minigun. Atlas, who doesn't have much health either, can literally rewind himself back in time and reset his health to full. But what does Torvald, the tank with the lowest health pool in the frontline class and no mobility, get? A few small healing cards and a pittance of a shield when he uses his abilities that have lengthy cooldowns. If a champion has a massive health pool, they shouldn't have as much self-sustain as someone who has a lower health pool if they're a tank, but Torvald has the unfortunate combination of having an extremely low health pool and almost no self-sustain. Grok is literally a better tank than him, and that's just depressing. The rest of Torvald's cards aren't that great either. 4 of his cards are dedicated to ammo regeneration for some reason, and the rest are for reducing cooldowns. He does have one card which can increase his maximum health, but this doesn't even put him above 4,000 when it's maxed out. He does have some unique cards on his protection which grants him movement speed, healing, and ammo to the shielded target, but the healing is incredibly small and the movement speed only lasts for 2 seconds. For a support style tank, he really sucks at supporting. So what can be done to fix this champion? Well, I think there are really 2 different paths that Hi-Rez can take him. Either bring him back closer to the way he was when he was first released, as a juggernaut who can leech shields and bully people near him, which I would prefer, or turn him into a fully fledged support. Torvald is currently in sort of a limbo phase, where he's a tank who can't tank, and a support who can't support. He tries to be both and ends up failing at everything. Hi-Rez needs to commit him to one class or the other, instead of having him be half of both. Now, these suggestions I'm about to give would be ways to go about fixing him, but of course the numbers aren't exact figures they would use, and the abilities themselves might need some tweaking, but these suggestions are just to get the ball rolling and brainstorm possible ideas that can make Torvald good and fun again. So how would they turn Torvald into more of a tank? Well, first, they'd have to buff his health and shielding. Bring his health up to 4,000 and bring his personal shield up to at least 3,000. This will make him feel much tankier without being overpowered. Most tanks hover around the 4,000 HP mark, and with the HP card he could have up to 4,750 HP. His shield can still be countered by Wrecker, but he'll have a whole lot more health to work with once that shield is destroyed. Second, I'd bring back his ability to leech other people's shields with his recharge. Make his recharge last for 2 seconds and recharge his shield relatively slowly. However, if he walks near a shield like Barrick's or Fernando's, he'll deal heavy damage to that shield per second and recharge his shield much quicker. This will open up some interesting possibilities in the meta with Torvald. In Ranked, you could pick Torvald to counter a shield-heavy team, whereas you would shy away from using him versus tanks like Atlas or Inara. He could counter some tanks, but be countered by others. This would force players to choose whether picking Torvald in the current situation would be a good idea or not, and it would give him even more sustain versus tanks which do have beefy shields. I would also make his Nullify more reliable in one of several different ways. The first option would be to make it so you only need line of sight to initially cast it on an enemy, but it can still affect them through walls. They would be able to cancel it by walking out of range, but could no longer dart behind a wall to ignore it. The second way would be to have Torvald fire out a single projectile which deals the full damage of Nullify at once, and nullifies the target for the same duration as Nullify currently has. This would only be a single target ability, but it would be much more reliable in terms of dealing the full amount of damage and silencing them for the full duration of the Nullify. The final way is to bring back the old Runic Blast, and have him fire out an explosive which can affect multiple people and deal a decent burst of damage. This would be the most game-changing way to make it better, and would be ideal for making Torvald a powerful off-tank. If his health and shielding is buffed in this way, I would actually nerf his weapon down to 500 damage per second, or 125 damage per shot. Since his Nullify does 800 damage, and it would more reliably deal the full damage to the target either through a blast or harder to avoid beam, nerfing his weapon would actually keep his power in check. I would still keep the weapon's function the same though. He doesn't need the old beam back, since it was limiting and didn't take any skill to hit on a target. Finally, I'd give him crowd control immunity in his ultimate, and buff his protection back to 1000 health by default. This would make it much more viable without the use of Thanks Grandpa, and would open up the opportunity to use his other talents. Speaking of his talents, let's rework those too. I would leave Thanks Grandpa pretty much the same. An extra 500 health buff to the shield would give it 1500 health, which is enough to prevent any enemy champion from one-shotting it without Wrecker. I would completely rework his other two talents, however. I would change Direct Current so that it deals an additional 10% of the Nullify target's health per second as damage. Against squishy champions who only have about 2000 health, this would only be about a 400 health increase on Nullify, which deals 800 damage over 2 seconds by default. If it were changed to a single burst, then they'd receive a burst of 1200 damage. Against tanks, however, this would be a very powerful ability to have. Against Khan, who has 4000 health by default, his Nullify would deal a 1600 damage burst. This does sound a little bit insane, but keep in mind that this is his off-tank talent, and his weapon would also be nerfed to do even less damage per second than Makoa's. This burst would be crucial in helping him fight other tanks. I could see maybe making it 5% or 8% if it turns out that it's too OP, but I like the general idea and it could be an interesting way to make Torvald a better off-tank. Lastly, I would rework Field Study to make Torvald even tankier. I would have it reduce the cooldown of recharge by 5 seconds, bringing it from 14 seconds to 9 seconds, and I'd increase the base health of a shield by 1000. Keep in mind that this new, tankier Torvald is able to leech health from the enemy's shields and use it for his own, so having this ability much more often means Torvald will be able to destroy others' shields more frequently and keep himself alive much better. Again, I could see nerfing the cooldown reduction to something like 3 or 4 seconds if it turns out that this talent is too OP. I just really like this idea, and it would be an interesting way to make Torvald beefier. Now, let's talk cards. I would get rid of most of his ammo regeneration cards and give him a bit more self-sustain. I'd buff all his self-heal and self-shield cards by a reasonable amount, and then replace his ammo cards with something like increase the rate of shield regeneration by X% on recharge, and increase the duration of the silence by 0.2 seconds per tier on Nullify. I would double the duration of the movement speed given by Wind Dancer, and drop its effectiveness to 6% per tier. I'd also buff Life Giver to 100 per tier instead of 75. All these card changes would give Torvald some more build diversity and make his loadouts a bit stronger. Now, let's talk about the second option for fixing Torvald, which is to turn him into a full-blown healer. There are a lot of different possibilities for how Evil Mojo could achieve this, but I want to give my thoughts on what could be done. For starters, I'd nerf his base health down to 2000, and nerf his base shield to 500. When he recharges his shield, teammates within, say, 70 feet receive 50% of the shielding and get healed by 500 healing per second. Recharge would also have its cooldown reduced to 10 seconds, so he could do this fairly frequently. I would make it last for 2 seconds and give 400 shielding per second. So Torvald could use recharge to regenerate his own shields, share 50% of the shielding with allies, and heal them for 500 healing per second. This would give him some self-sustain and group healing similar to Grover or Pip, but in a completely unique way. His protection would give a 300 health shield by default, and would heal his teammate for a burst of 800 health. Since this has a 6 second cooldown and only affects one person, it could be fairly balanced when considering Cauterize will drop the heal down to just 200 in the late game. Maybe 1000 health would be better, or maybe it would be too strong and should go down to 700. Either way, something like this could work in my opinion. I would also give the protection a finite range of 120 units, similar to Saris. I'd leave his Nullify pretty much exactly how it is. It's a good crowd control ability for a support to have, and would be excellent against flanks who try and go after support Torvald. I'd also leave his ult the same, but give it the same crowd control immunity as the tank version of Torvald. Now, onto his talents. For Thanks Grandpa, a possible rework could be to make it give 50% of protection's effects to allies within 40 feet. It could give him even more group healing, and would be a good way to make him a much more effective support. Field Study could give his recharge a bigger range, and heal allies for 600 healing per second and give them 100% of the shield instead of just 50%. While the numbers might need to be tweaked a bit, this could be another fun way to make Torvald a powerful support. And lastly, Direct Current. This one could have a similar rework to how Tank Torvald got Direct Current reworked. It could do 5% of the enemy champion's base health as damage per second instead of 10%, and it could change so the beam no longer gets disrupted by walls. It would be support Torvald's damage talent, and could be a fun way to make him a good damage support. As far as his cards go, several changes need to be made to turn him into a support. Life Giver would need to be changed entirely, perhaps to giving up to 30% lifesteal to the protected target for 2 seconds. Time Shaper and Wind Dancer would be pretty much fine, or perhaps Wind Dancer could get the same treatment as Tank Torvald got and make it give up to 30% movement speed for 4 seconds instead. The ammo card for Nullify would have to go again, and perhaps the ammo card for Recharge could give ammo to allies upon activation too. Recharge could also have a range card in place of Vital Grasp, which would act similar to Grover's Verdant Expanse. Now, both of these ideas of turning Torvald into a tank or support would drastically change how he plays and would definitely change the meta, and Torvald would become a much better champion than he currently is. A tank Torvald would be an amazing off-tank who could do loads of damage and counter other tanks with shields, and a support Torvald would give a healthy balance of shields and healing to his teammates in both group and single target methods, and he would be a very interesting support to play. But I have one final proposal, something that would take some considerable effort, but ultimately enable a way for both of these two designs to make it into the game. Consider this, an entirely new champion. One much younger, eager to learn, and wanting nothing but to master the elements of the arcane. Consider an apprentice to Torvald. You see, Torvald is already an old man, one who is wise in the ways of crystal technology and arcane magic. It would make perfect sense for a new champion to be introduced as the apprentice of this wise old master, and who could have similar abilities to Torvald since he learned under him, but not quite the same. Perhaps Torvald would be a master of healing magic and would be reworked into a support, but this new apprentice would try and branch out into offensive magic and shielding technologies and take the role of a tanky Torvald like I laid out earlier. This would be the best of both worlds. The people who enjoy Torvald as a support would have that as an opportunity, but the people who enjoy and remember old tanky Torvald's gameplay would have this new champion to enjoy. It would take a lot of effort, but it might be an elegant solution to the problem Torvald currently has. Instead of choosing just one path, why not go down both? It would be fun and exciting, and it would bring a whole new wave of possibilities and playstyles into the game. While it would take a lot of effort, it would be something to consider. In the meantime, something should still be done to Torvald, and one of the two paths should be taken. Either turn Torvald into a full tank who can deal damage and soak up bullets, or turn him into a fun and unique support champion. Torvald is the worst example of a hybrid in this game, and he can't stay like this forever. Also, when something does get done to Torvald, please give him a new skin. It's been over 2 years already. The old man needs some new clothes. Anyways, that's going to be the end of this video. What do you guys think of my suggestions to fix Torvald? Would you rather see him become more of a beefy tank, or would you like to see him be reworked into a support? Or do you like my idea of a new apprentice champion to Torvald, one who could become either the support or tank version of Torvald? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and if you like any of my ideas, please share this video with your friends. You can also join my Discord server where you can pick up tips, leave suggestions, and become a part of our active community. Also, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload from me. And if you really enjoy my content and want to support the channel, consider becoming a member by clicking the join button down below. We have 11 amazing members who help to keep this channel going. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.